Hello, Michelle Gray. How are you doing?
I am doing awesome, Lisa. How are you?
Good. And how's my boy Eric? I love you.
He is doing great, and he says, "Mama, I love you so much." And he was sitting with him just a few moments ago. He does this every once in a while with you, but he makes himself a little boy and sits in
Oh,
your lap, and he hugs you, and then he shows himself as a man holding you
oh,
and hugging you.
sweet.
So he's just expressing
Oh,
how much he loves you and how much he cares about you.
those
It,
days were just wonderful.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, sweet boy.
Yeah. All right, we have something exciting. So y'all get a pen and pencil. I mean, a pen and paper, so you can write down her address. But I'm going to put it at the end. But just in case, because some people don't have the patience to wait to the end. All right, so we're going to talk about the Sumerian kings, which are like the ancient Anunnaki, and also wheat, how that came into being. So they have these tablets, Eric, proving that there was another race 360,000. This is going to be a 2 or 3 part thing, okay?
Mhm.
360,000 years ago, um, that was found by Albert Perry. Oh, no, no, no. It, never mind. And it's related to this guy, Albert Perry, who has a Y chromosome that's unlike anything in today's humans. So, you know, it was from a humans like 36,000 years ago. The Y chromosome, this different Y chromosome in Albert Perry. I wonder how he found that.
He says that's true.
And they said these people that lived back then could live even as long as 36,000 years. Ugh, that sounds awful. Ugh. So, what were these people, Eric? Were they the Sumerian kings, the Anunnaki, or some other alien race? Or
He says a mixture, um, so that there's alien DNA, or what we would call alien DNA, mixed with this Sumerian. Um, he said that they're okay. Um, like it was muffed out, so it was not something that control. It was not something that was widely known. It was kept very secret. And over, of course, many, many generations and many years, this has just been something that we would think of as a folklore or as a tale, that we wouldn't believe that that actually could happen, and does exist. He said that there's also anthropologists or anthropology study, he's saying,
Mhm.
study that supports this, not just what you're talking about, but he says that there's other, he's calling them hints, in ancient study that
Oh,
connects to this information.
that's cool.
Mhm.
They say that the first humans were bred to be a sterile working class by, there's Enlil, one of the Anunnaki Sumerian kings, and he just wanted to use humans because the atmosphere is different here, and they didn't want to force the effort. The gravity was difficult. But then there's Enki, he was the good guy who respected humans and wanted to help them evolve. So, but were the first humans bred as a sterile working class by Enlil's Anunnaki side of the clan?
Yes, he
And
says that's the short version of it. Mhm.
well, yeah, we've got a lot of questions, so I'll keep it short.
Mhm.
So, did they do that by splicing DNA, manipulating DNA, creating DNA out of thin air? I don't know.
He says mating,
Okay.
so um, mixing DNA, and he's talking about workers and even like Egyptian. This being like having slaves, workers, and he says, if we think about it, our society right now is like a modern version of this idea.
It is. And we'll get to that later. That's really interesting. You should say that. But so, did these aliens, Anunnaki, did they mate with the first humans, or were the first humans created like a vat or something?
Um, he's not saying it like that. He says yes, but he's keeps referencing to mating with them. But he says you have to understand that we're not thinking about the same biology that we think about mating as
Oh,
two human beings.
oh,
There's influence, and he says like technology.
okay.
There's I said, what do they do? Inject them with it? And he goes, well, you could kind of say that,
Did
but
they?
he's calling it a technology.
Okay, but it's maybe
Technology.
the aliens with humans. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
All right, now blue blood, that apparently is supposedly based on the blue copper-based blood of the Anunnaki reptilians. And they say this line can be traced to Europe, to actual royalty like the Windsor family, etc. Is that is there any truth to that?
Yes, he says there is truth to that.
Wow. So
Yes.
so they don't look like reptiles. Is that because they
No.
shift their image, or is it because they've evolved and mated with humans over the length of time so that they look more human?
Yeah, he says that's right, Mom. He says this would be evolution, evolving.
Okay, so it comes from the blue copper-based bloodline, but their blood is probably not copper-based now, right? In the current.
No,
Okay.
no.
Now, did the Sumerian gods, i.e., Anunnaki, require the first humans to say some sort of oath that goes to basically for them to lose their freedom and free thought and obey and become slaves? And goes to,
Erik says manipulation. So
how do they do that?
he says, well, it's offering them um, power or making them think that they had power, like turning them against each other.
Mm.
Um, he says it's okay. Slow down a little bit for me. He says that it's like they had the idea planted in them subconsciously, but it was manipulation of offering them like, here, we're going to help you. We're going
Oh,
to teach you how to do this, and we're going to show you how to do this, and look at what you can do with this. And that started to develop, he says, less of the heart and more in the mind. And that's how the ego started to become more front and center, and that created separation.
ugh. That's I know that's so true. If we break this oath, apparently we were to be punished in some tangible way, perhaps by way of DNA manipulation. Is that true? And are we still under the influence of that oath now?
You just say the first part again.
Okay, sorry. If we're, in the ancient text, apparently, if we break this oath, we will be punished. We were to be punished in some tangible way, perhaps DNA manipulation. Is that true?
No,
What?
Erik says that's part of the manipulation.
Okay, so what will we be punished by?
It's not being punished. He says this is what it's the same idea that has evolved all along, that we're where we are right now. And the idea that there is somebody or a god, a being, something that will affect us. It's fear. It was installing fear.
It's like hell
So
doesn't exist, but we some people think so. It's that kind of thing. The belief that something's going to happen to them.
he
Okay.
also adds, and he says, and Mom, don't forget that the only way that control and manipulation can be successful is when the beings, the human beings, whomever, believes that they do not have power within themselves.
Well, of course
And
they
so
do. Are we still under?
that's right.
Are we still under the influence of that oath now? At least part of our populace.
Yeah, he said that that's what is breaking apart in our world on many different levels.
Interesting.
He says that we have already, he's calling it a win, that we have already won, meaning that when he says different levels, that there's multiple different timelines, and the timeline that we have shifted into is the corruption or the breaking apart so that we can discover our true roots, which many already understand this. So, yes, there are, he's saying a portion of the population that is still under the influence of this. But he says, when you claim your power, when you claim your understanding, your beliefs, why all of this is so important to understand, that then breaks you of being under, he says, that spell, or however you want to call it.
So is that why our societies are like structured like the oligarchy that controls the masses and the poor masses that are manipulated and lied to and controlled?
Yes, he said yes.
Does that have to do with the Bilderberg, New World Order, cabal, global elite thing? Are they the blue bloods? Are they the oligarchy that still wants us under this oath?
Yes, he says that's all layered in there throughout our world. Yes.
So suppose we free ourselves. We'll say, God damn it, I want my freedom back. This oath is crap. Um, will we become like the free humans that lived so many years ago, and even have the special godlike powers that the Enlil Anuki Anak Annunaki clan did not want us to possess? That they were trying to avoid that. Will we live longer and have more godlike powers if we free ourselves?
He said yes, and he says that's what we are projecting into our future timelines. That is exactly what he's citing, the golden age, that this is a mixture of our divinity and mixed with technology. And so it's like a modern version of what we were before, a pure version of, he says, what we were before with all the knowledge in between.
Oh wow! So how do we truly free ourselves? We can't just okay, I'm free. I don't believe in this oath. I mean, that sounds too easy.
And he says, well, he goes, really good question, Mom, because he says, this is why when I talk so much, or he goes, many spiritual teachers talk about your discernment, how important your discernment is. And so this has to do with being able to free yourself, because just as there are many layers of what's going on in our world right now, there are many realities that are also playing out right now. So, as the human being that you are, to free yourself is to first understand that it is only you that can decide what resonates with your soul, what is truth for you, where you're going to put your energy. You also must do the research. He says there's been a long line of society depending on what they tell us to do, what
Okay.
they suggest that we should do, coming to our food, to our education, to our employment, how we operate. And he says, Mom, like you just said, that idea of enslavement is exactly what is breaking apart right now in the world. Now, he says this has the energy of divinity, meaning that we have crossed a point where we must understand as individuals that it is our individual choice and right to be able to make decisions for ourselves. And he says the hard part for a lot of people is because when we are stuck in patterns and we look at all of the patterns that we have gone through as a collective, we say, well, how could that be? Or how could I ever break out of this cycle? But he says that's why every step of understanding yourself, healing yourself, and going to the deeper layers of understanding what you truly believe in, deciding where you want to focus your energy is manifesting the reality that you experience. He says they don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that you can manifest your own reality, that you can create, that you are naturally a creator being. They want you to go through a higher power. They want you, and he says higher power, not meaning God, but
Yeah.
to have somebody to answer to.
Yeah.
He says, and not understanding that you are God, you are the higher power, you are the creator. And
Wow.
that's what we're here. The great remembering, he says, is remembering exactly what this is and what we're experiencing right now. So he says, be your best friend and really look at what you believe in. And if you've been believing in something that you really don't know the details, like, well, I believe that because that's what I was told, and that's what my mother told me, and that's what my grandmother told me, and generations, he says, stop and really sniff the air, sniff out the details. He says, really listen, because he says you will find that what you believed in all along maybe isn't really what's going on. And he says, and that's the power of what's opening up in all of us right now.
So if this is like a forced reality levied on us, then of course we do have the choice of whether to be slaves or whether to be free. And I'm just wondering, can we change from this? What is the duality consciousness really? Okay. The globe, the elites, or the oligarchy versus the masses is just only one level of it, but there's duality on multiple levels, to a unity consciousness where we are all connected and there's no separation. Is that what breaking the oath means?
Yes. He says oneness is the truth. Oneness is the truth. And he's saying that like the truth. Oneness is the truth. And yes, there is duality. There will always be a sense of duality. He says we cannot have this physical life without duality, because it's that gives us the opportunity to be able to learn and grow consciously. And he says, so even as we move forward consciously, there will always be that portion, because free will exists, and there will always be beings here that will still carry out their free will. But the part that's important for each of us to understand is that because we are all one, we have duality within us. We all have duality. And so he says, without getting into, because he says this can be a very deep conversation that we could carry on through, but he says, understand that in choosing your reality, it's not so much ignoring what is happening, but it is making the choice for yourself. It's awareness. And there is the power in, as each person chooses for themselves, chooses their reality, and this is from the heart, that will connect in oneness. It's already happening. And that energy is what he shows it coming up underneath everything and pulling out all of the rattlesnakes, is how he's calling it. Let's
Okay.
pull out all the rattlesnakes in
Yeah.
that way.
There's a lot of them. So here's what's kind of interesting. We were hunter-gatherers, right? And then all of a sudden, organized agriculture, and I have a little bit more to say here, appeared like 10.6 thousand years ago. I mean, how did we totally changed from hunter-gatherers to farmers overnight? And there was no evidence of any evolution of tools. And then, with that agricultural society, we had to stay put. We were no longer nomadic, and we had culture, built monuments, math, science, agricultural feats, city planning, Hammurabi's law. The code of law. The money came into the patriarchal society. Started the definition of female and male roles were more distinct. It used to be matriarchal. They had plumbing, how we measure time, 60 minutes, 60 seconds, all that. It all developed instantly after we were just a hunter-gatherer nomadic civilization. What was up with that? Was there some sort of intervention? Like ET intervention or something?
He's saying that yes, there was influence. He's showing what the purpose of what they would use their like changing the, because of their thought, the consciousness changing. And yes, this was okay, right into Egypt, because he keeps showing me the pyramids and Egypt and having different ideas of being in the ego. Okay, okay. I'm just trying to get him to give me some less pictures and more words so I can explain this a little bit better. He says not necessarily overnight, but it changed our need to gather ourselves. So he says, even though in our modern society right now, because he says we've become very still and much more profit organized. It's more about profit. And this was introduced in a way of consciousness. So he says it's not as if it just happened overnight, but it was the thought. It was no longer about, and not everywhere, because he says this happened in different cultures in different ways around the world. But he says our modern society was built on the idea of growth, like greed, economic.
Yeah.
And so he just says, so without getting into the detail of exactly how it happened, he keeps going to the ego. And so he shows me this, he showed me this a couple times, the heart and the head switching. Like
Okay.
this
Yeah.
is switching into a different space. And then that changed how we were going forward in the world.
Wow. Well, with a money system too that was developed all of a sudden when agriculture came to bear, then all of a sudden now a small group of elites are able to control the masses and wheels. I don't know, and naturally they have a high level of control, wielding a high level of control that enslaves, the rest of us. So money, in part, did that, right?
Yes, greed,
Um,
and the and power.
okay. There was also something similar I wanted to ask. So, was the first real true hierarchy, because I don't know that there was a big hierarchy when we were hunter gatherers and nomadic, was the first hierarchy among humans of those who cultivate the land and those who benefit from it, so that no longer able to roam, hunt, and gather, so they became dependent on the civilization of food to survive? Is that the
Yes.
first hierarchy?
Yes.
God, that's terrible. And the Anunnaki, Enlil, I mean, as I said before, what was the purpose of introducing agriculture to human to enslave us to one area? Anunnaki came from different barometric pressure and gravity that was it made it difficult for them to farm. So they genetically engineered humans to be their gardeners. It's, Enlil's clan. Was that the kind of the beginning of it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. He says yes, Mom.
Jesus. So there's this lady, Sophia, who apparently is an ET geneticist, right? An Anunnaki goddess.
Mm-hmm.
She genetically modified the grasses of Earth, apparently, after the ET human interaction. Then all of a sudden, all sorts of grains came into existence, and ancient civilization, as we said, exploded, and the culture developed, and all that. So she was a good guy, though, right? I mean, she wasn't like, let's change you so that you could be our gardeners, or was she? I mean,
No, that wasn't the intent, because what he shows is modification to yield more, like
okay.
modification to make more, like crossbreeding, um,
Okay.
crossbreeding the plants, because he's showing like grasses.
Yeah.
like crossbreeding them
Yeah.
to yield more crop, to
They,
make more. He also shows beer, like
oh, okay.
like 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 introducing different types of grass. He even says bean, like a
Okay.
bean.
Yeah.
um, Introducing different. So he says, no, that was not something that was um, her intention, but yet, just as it is not our intention to hurt with what we buy, with what we, it has that same sense to it.
All right. So, but so basically, the bad Anunnaki altered our DNA because to work as their gardeners. Then she genetically modified wheat and beans and things to increase crop production, which would increase the rate of our growth of civilization. They say that she had banks of genomes of seeds and of animals. And there was almost like a museum of seeds housed in boxes and sorted that are very old, that still exist. Is that true?
He says, yes.
Wow. So, but after the flood, they planted the Great Flood. That was caused by the Anunnaki. Is that right? That attempt to wipe out the pre-Adamites. I mean, the original humans.
Yes.
That's not the same as Noah's flood, is it?
Well, he says it's, yes, this is all, he
Connect.
says that they're, the Anunnaki were kept out of the big story, is how he's saying it.
Oh, okay. So apparently, after the flood, they planted the first seeds in the Zagros Mountains because those mountains were the first to be free of just all the too much water and mud. Is there any truth to that?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so here, go back here. Um, all right, so did the introduction, oh yeah, did Sophia and others, I guess, splice ET types of grains and grasses with the ancient grains that are originated on Earth?
Yes.
Did the
Um, it was influenced. It was influenced by ET technology or ET. Um, I'll tell you what I'm seeing is these little molecules that look like fireflies, and
okay.
I can see two hands being held out. I can see these little molecule looking things, and they look like fireflies. They're kind of a bluey greeny color, and then I can see seeds, like a
Oh,
handful of seeds, and they're going together.
so what is
No,
the DNA of the little lightning bug things, fireflies? Are they DNA insertion to be inserted?
yeah, he
Oh,
says it's like crossbreeding.
okay. Wow. That
It's like
sounds
crossbreeding.
okay. So einkorn was the very first ancient grain, and it was found. It's found in the Kardog Mountains, just like I said that was the first place they planted after the flood receded, and it's apparently older than any other grain known to man. It's like they trace it back to 10.5 thousand years ago. Is that an ET grain, or are they talking about that's the original Earth grain, or is it just spliced, genetically modified ET Earth combo grain, or what? Einkorn.
Einkorn. Okay, so
It's near Gobekli Tepe, the monument.
he's not saying that the einkorn was, because he's showing me like what looks like grass with these little pieces on top of it.
Okay.
He's not saying that that was okay. Okay, yes, that it does have in that time period, because he says 11,000 years ago. In that time period, it was, he says it was modified, but that grain itself is the original grain, the original ancient grain. But as it was found, had some modification or had been modified.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Did the introduction of wheat in our diet purposely change our DNA? And if so, was Sophia involved in that?
Um, okay, so first of all, he just says, okay, to answer the first part, he says there was, if we take the energy of production, producing large amounts, there is an intention through this of greed. However, the intention was not in thinking that this would change the DNA, because he calls this evolution over time,
Okay.
over the change of the food, but not that this was like a, we're going to do this and this is eventually what's going to happen to them.
Okay.
Because he keeps showing me it has to do with volume.
What do you
Has
mean?
to do with volume, like the amount that's being made.
Oh, just crop and uh, uh production increase.
Okay, yeah. And he says, Sophia, it's like having knowledge that this would affect human beings, that it would be something that would over time, that it would change. It's like, what's the best way to explain this, Eric? It's like when you know you're doing something, and if you keep doing it for a very, very long time, eventually there could be problems.
Okay.
And it's knowing that there's someone connected to her, and he says ETs, that are more interested in control and power and not on the results or how this would affect human beings.
Okay. So also there are monuments to the goddess of wheat in agriculture called Nisaba, apparently Enki's daughter, and apparently it's said that she taught the hunter-gatherers how to farm, like creating an outreach program for them. Is there any truth to that? She was helping us.
Yes, and he says that, and her heart of love, like he's saying of love coming from her.
Was Sophia an Anunnaki or some other type of alien race?
He says connected to Anunnaki. He's calling her a hybrid.
Okay.
She was mixed with human or something, but she's got human DNA, he's
Oh,
saying.
wow.
But he says that she was in a class of her own.
Okay, cool. So, all right, so backing up, so there was a major solar outburst 9700 BC that snapped us out of the ice age. It's this coronal mass ejection, and it caused instant melting of the glaciers, earthquakes, of volcanic activity, etc. So there's this huge cataclysm, as we talked about, that wiped out a lot of people, and the survivors moved to Anatolia to settle and rebuild. And that's when they started farming wheat, so they weren't nomadic anymore. The key point was the beginning. The key point was the beginning of that key point. Sorry, was the beginning of civilization. Did they choose to form around Göbekli Tepe because they wanted to stay near the site? We talked about that and another thing. It's so, or is it so they could feed those who migrated back from the cataclysm? You know, it's like
He's answering yes to you.
I mean, the survivors were coming in, I guess, drawn to the monument at Göbekli Tepe. And so they wanted to grow wheat around there to be able to feed them, or?
He says yes, but he's also saying like natural order, and he's saying, he's showing me like Earth's progression and natural order, and that, okay, hold on. he's showing me that there was no, like, I don't know if this was like people were magnetized to that area.
Oh, okay.
Like they're being drawn to that area.
Mm.
I'm not quite sure because I don't even know what any of this is about, so I'm not sure how to make sense of this. But he keeps mentioning about the world, about how this was being melted, about the ice age being melted, and then the earth is cleansing itself to be part of the new generation,
Oh,
and that this was the start of the new generation.
oh, cool. Well, they say that they developed, there was a new type of wheat created so that it could be planted more successfully around Göbekli Tepe.
He says, and the process not as difficult as before, or
Oh,
so whatever they would do with the wheat was different than what it was before, so it wasn't as tedious to refine it and work with it.
okay. Okay. So anyway, this cataclysm separated humanity. Now the pre-Adamites were apparently leading humans at the time. Okay, they're the guys. I think they're aliens. The one with the big elongated skulls.
Hmm.
And most of the pre-Adamites died, and the rest were spread all across the world. Obviously, some drawn to Göbekli Tepe, and so then humans were taught by benevolent ETs, I guess Inca's tribe, animal husbandry, farming, grains brought from another planet and spliced with grains here, as we said. Yeah, so okay, we already talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the the Garden of Eden between the Tigris and Euphrates is where they settled after the cataclysm. I guess that must be around kind of close to Göbekli to recreate civilization. So all of a sudden, barbarism changed to an ordered society, which has the hierarchy though. And what race of aliens intervene in all this to help? Yeah, to
What race of aliens to help? Sorry, I missed that last part.
we settled in the Garden of Eden area.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we settled after the big cataclysm. So there's some ET intervention that helped us recreate um, our civilization and transform us into barbarians to more civilized human beings.
He says Anunnaki. He says Anunnaki, both good and bad. He's also showing that there's an influence of Palladian as well.
Okay.
He keeps giving me the same energy as what we were talking about before, but it's like a different form of them or different group of them.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly how we would refer to them, but he's giving me the word Anunnaki.
Okay. Probably the Inca side was okay. So Nimma was a queen who enforces her law on Kardag, the mountains, etc., and would be in charge of the colony and oversee the survival process on the Eden Mountain. She was married to Enlil, the bad guy, but then marries two-timer Enki, and has a change of heart for the betterment of Earth's agriculture and life in general. Is there truth behind that?
He says yes.
Okay, well that's good. Better late than never.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody knows there's a massive fallout between Enlil's clan, who wanted to, like I say, wipe out humans and tried to do so with a great flood, and Inke and his people were horrified and wanted to protect their precious invention, the human. Was there a big war? And if so, can you tell us about it?
He's showing me the introduction of weaponry,
Mm.
like teaching how to, because he says yes, that there was a war. Show me a lot of pictures, like pulling bow and arrow, and he also shows that this being the change or the separation of humanity being closed off from them. Like
Okay.
there was a um, out of protection. So he says that there was some protection to be closed off. And this is how he's saying it to me: the bad guys leaving, the bad guys going.
Okay. Oh, good.
If that makes
So,
sense.
did they fight in space with laser guns and all that kind of stuff too, or was it mostly on
He,
Earth? And was it
uh, yes, he says yes, there was other technology at play, and what he's showing me looks like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it is, the sky is very dark, but it is daylight, and there are beams. There are, it looks like some kind of a dust cloud in the air, and I can see beings that look like humans, but they're lifting off the ground. Like they can lift themselves right up. And
Yeah.
I can see others on the earth with what would look like a bow and arrow, with great big rocks that have some kind of a, what is that, Eric?
Oh, like a rock is tied up in a rope leather,
Yeah,
and
but it's got something around it that's glowing on
oh,
it. Like there's
wow.
something else with that.
Hmm.
Um,
Were they humans with those rocks, or did the humans even fight at all, or was it just Enki's aliens
um, there,
Onlil?
there's human involved, and I'm also getting the sense of giants,
Oh,
or
okay.
like much bigger beings.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Were they on our side?
yes,
Oh, good.
yes, yes,
Yeah, you want the giants on your side, trust me.
yes,
So the bad guy, Enlil, and his clan, they lost and they left.
yes,
And then all of a sudden, we became a society that doesn't really mix with aliens. Like we were used to having aliens all around us. But then is that the point
yes,
where you said about the protection and no, we were shut off from full disclosure?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Now, after the closure of Göbekli Tepe, the Neolithic revolution and all the knowledge gained spread out all over the world and reached the Arc of Levant in Egypt around 8,000 to 8,500 BC. Is that true? And how did it spread? Just word of mouth, telephone. Hey, guess what's going on here?
he says, okay, so he goes, remember that he calls it the collective brain. He says, so there's a collective brain. Um, was some travel or some, because he says that, yes, there was some, what we would consider word of mouth, but he keeps showing like the collective brain,
Okay.
people having knowledge. So he says, think of how many times you see something that was invented and you go, oh my God, I had that idea 10 years ago.
Well, oh
That
yeah,
type of thing.
I just saw this thing about um, scalar energy. How we the mother, for example, part of our embryo's DNA lodges in our brains and our nervous system, and that's why mothers, I mean, they have this broadcast between their the cells that have their self receptors on and their own self receptors. And so when all the way across the globe, one of our kids is in trouble, we sense it. So
Yes.
is it kind of like that information,
Yes.
we're all connected? Okay.
Yes, yes. And so Erik says there's, and this is what we have moved into. This is what is happening. Is it's the understanding of how we truly operate without the influence of manipulation.
Oh, wow. So so why did Göbekli Tepe close down? Why did they bury it? It's apparently like a tuning fork thing that different residences would do things like open a portal. I can't remember.
It's like, he says changing location.
Okay.
Like,
Do they think it would be dangerous to to be discovered by us, that we would use it. I mean, it would.
No longer fruitful is what he
Oh,
says. It was no longer fruitful for anyone.
okay. I just have a couple more questions. Wow. I thought this would be several parts, but how did Sophia alter the DNA that created the Babylonian bloodline? Was that due to the cultivation of wheat? I mean, this whole thing is suggesting that our DNA is altered by the consumption of wheat.
Erik says not completely. That's just a portion of it.
Okay, but wheat does
It
can.
does play a part.
All
Says
right.
it does play a part. Yeah.
So, but did she alter the DNA in not just with wheat, but in another way to create the Babylonian bloodline, which I think means that basically the Adamites, the regular human,
Yes.
not the Adamites.
He said yes. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about. Oh yeah, the geneticists really started analyzing the DNA in ancient grains and found like it couldn't have come from Earth. There's no way. So it must have come from ETs, like what, on spaceships, on meteors, and carrying little bags that say thank you all over it, shopping bags.
He says, Mom, he says, so he goes, no, we got to think outside of the box here, because that's we think about that, the time and space of the third dimension or the physical earth. And he says, so there were ways of being able to travel and to provide technology. And he shows like using consciousness portals. And he also says there's technology that would allow things to, okay, he's giving like Star Trek, like beam me up, Scotty, like
Okay.
putting it like there's like a bzzz, and then it arrives and there it is.
It's so awesome. So by the way, y'all write down the Michelle Gray's site is thehealing-h.arts. I mean art.com. thehealing-art.com, and I will put it at the end and also in the description box. So, but don't go yet, because we're going to have a couple more cool ones. So now let's talk about, now our wheat today is not anything like it was 40 years ago. Okay. And it had the best intentions of modifying it to help feed more of the world, right? More crop efficiency and the like. But now it's from 4 feet, now it's just dwarfy, little 18 whatever, and all of a sudden that's when things changed. In I mean, there's more inflammation related diseases, more obesity, and they did that by injecting the DNA. You could inject viruses, bacteria, insects, even human DNA to make these crops perform better. But I think it's linked to the rise in obesity and diabetes and asthma and cancer and food allergies and infertility, etc. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. He says that again, he says it has a lot to do with being able to provide more, feed more. He's calling it fillers. Purposeful ways to be more profitable in the agriculture sector,
Yeah.
adding things. So yes, all of that is indeed true. He says that not everybody is affected in the same ways by a lot of the modification. Not every body is the same, but he says that we are not built to be able to ingest and process what has been added to. And he says, because he says, don't just think about your loaves of bread, people. Think about everything, not only what you are eating, but what you are putting on your body.
Oh yeah. So so it seems like it's actually altered our DNA, and also, well, the new wheat is more inflammatory. It has more gliadin, or I can't remember, but that inflames the gut, and the gut tries to heal, inflames again, tries to heal, but then it becomes a leaky gut, and that leaky gut it's opens the possibility of toxins just going from the gut to your bloodstream. So, right, is that what's going on with this new wheat?
yes, he said that he's saying that this is a we could call this a pandemic of its own,
Yeah.
um, because this creates the biggest um, oh, that's right. He's just saying that this is that big cycle of this creates the biggest havoc on our modern bodies,
Yeah.
and that this is something that medical officials are aware of.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, we've altered the grains, but have the grains altered us and our DNA so that we pass on the same crappy whatever, diabetes, etc., to our progeny?
Yes.
See, that's
Yes.
even if, okay. So, is there any way to create a grain that doesn't do all this, but still we can feed the entire world? Isn't there a way to chemically mutate
Yeah.
or genetically mutate it? There's the two ways I think.
Erik says this is going to be a process, that this is all part of what is changing as people take their own sovereignty and their own health into their hands. Um, he said that the breaking down of many of the bigger systems will allow the examination of
Okay.
a lot of this. And he says that this will also give way. Okay. He says that moving back to the original plant, he says being able to have something that is not so modified or added to. He says that there is going to be technology that will assist us in this. But he also said that one of the bigger issues that we will work ourselves into is not only how do we cure our own ailments, but how do we feed the rest of the world in areas that they're not able to. Okay, because he says there's a lot of
Yeah.
dependence on wheat in different areas of the world that are malnutritioned.
Yeah.
And so he said that all of what is happening is, he says, we are watching the world in action of breaking down systems to then bring in the truth so that we can build them back up in a more productive way. And productive means that by getting, instead of putting band-aids all over the problems, we are now getting to the root of
Good.
what this is. And he says, really, he goes, this is a very short period of time in history when we look at the grand scheme of it. So he says, it's not irreversible damage. He says, yes, there are lives that have had irreversible damage, but as a whole, this can be reversed.
Yeah, break the oath, people. But rice, is there a problem with that? And also, is there a nefarious reason by the oligarchy to this modified wheat? It didn't seem like it. I think there was all good intentions to increase
Yeah,
crop production.
he says that you're right, that it is in good intention. And then when he adds with rice, he says, it's not that, because he says it's not a whole lot different. It might be a little bit better. Um, but he said that okay, he just wants to give some advice that each one of us should examine our diet. And this is not something that we need permission to do from a doctor. However, he says you always want to discuss with your doctor when you change your diet. But he says eliminate some of the wheats, eliminate some of the foods, because there's so much processing. And he says rice even has additives in it. He says the rice that you buy in the store in a box
Oh no.
has stuff in it. He goes, if you can't pronounce what's
Oh,
on that box, he
terrible.
says, then you're eating things. Yeah,
Dust or
yeah,
something.
yeah. He actually said like rat poison.
Oh my God. All right. Well,
Yeah,
that's so good. Well,
yeah.
all right. So, anything else you want to advise? I mean, I guess we can research and see where we can get ancient grains and bread made of ancient grains. I'm sure they're available, and rice.
Yeah, he said, do your research. He says local and small.
Okay.
Purchase local and small. We're going to find that our diets are headed back to more of a seasonal and local sustaining diet. Not that we won't have food shipped around the world, but to help yourself, he says, focus on organic and as least amount of additives in the growing process as possible.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Michelle. You guys check her out at thehealing-art.com. I always have trouble with that. Talk this time. All right. Thank you, guys. And I'll put it right here. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Eric says, love you.
Love you. Love you both.
Bye. Love you too.